Have you had an encounter with the king or the queen of the forest and you'd like to share it with me and, all of our other listeners? Well, if so, send me an email with all the details. You can send your email to contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Hello there, everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of Buckeye Bigfoot. Now, tonight's journey down into Sasquatch Valley is going to take us deep into the forest along the Appalachian Trail, somewhere between the Tennessee and North Carolina borders. I think it's a good one. I think you're going to like it. Are you ready? Me too. Let's go. I work a high-stress job, and my escape is hiking and camping in the mountains. I live in Newport, Tennessee, and I have access to the Great Smoky Mountains and the Pisgah National Forest, just to name two of the many wild areas just outside my front door. There's a section of the Appalachian Trail that I have hiked many, many times throughout the years. The part that I have traveled the most is a trailhead south of me on I-40. I follow it over to Brown Gap. It's about 15 miles or so I can do that and make it a return trip in 3 days, and I overnight at the Groundhog Creek shelter. I left on a Friday, mid-morning. The skies were clear and it was partly sunny. This was in May of 2018. When I stopped at the Groundhog late that afternoon, I called out to anyone at the shelter as I approached to let them know I was there. I suddenly heard a squeaky hello back from another hiker inside the shelter. She was calling out from inside the shelter and didn't seem too anxious to come out and greet me. She seemed very nervous and very high-strung. Well, you meet all kinds on the trail, don't you? She introduced herself as Old Smokey. Not sure how she came by that name. She didn't smoke that I saw, and I wouldn't have called her old. I came around into the shelter, and I was a bit taken aback when I saw that she was pointing bear spray towards the shelter opening. Not at me directly, but she was in a defensive position. I figured, a woman hiking alone, maybe she's had some trouble before. I held my hands up jokingly, and she apologized, but she was very nervous. I made a little small talk, trying to ease her a little bit, but she was still acting very strange. Finally, I asked her if she would be more comfortable if I camped away from the shelter that night. She jumped and said no, absolutely not, and she asked me to please stay. I told her I was really afraid that I was making her uneasy somehow. She said no, and then in a few minutes she was making efforts to be more relaxed, and she was doing more of the small talk thing. But she kept her eyes out in front of the shelter, and she would step out only long enough to look around, and then retreat again into the shelter. She was stressed, though she was trying to hide it. And I broached the subject once again before dark about whether or not I made her feel uneasy. She said no, and that the cause of her unease was actually from a frightening run-in with a bear when she had gone to use the outhouse earlier. She said that while she was in there, it had come up to the outhouse, rubbed on the outhouse all over, and had tried to get in, and at one point she saw its eye as it looked through the crack in some wood high up between some slats. Well, I thought, that explained the nervousness, her watchfulness, and the way she was holding that bear spray. As the sun started to go down, we both settled into the shelter. Later, I was very glad she hadn't asked me to sleep somewhere else. Although I had a tent, it still would have been uncomfortable, because around midnight, it started raining cats and dogs. I had been asleep, and when I woke up, I thought it was the rain that had made me wake up. But it might have been something else. It did seem that Smokey had not gone to sleep at all. When I stirred in my sleeping bag and sat up, she very quietly told me we were not alone. Well, you know that woke me up. I could tell she was very scared. I got up quickly, got out of my bedroll, and asked her what, who, where. I wanted all the info of what was out there. I was wide awake, thinking we were about to have a bear confrontation. Then I heard something hit the wood wall behind us. I heard it plop onto the wood floor of the shelter. I said, "What was that?" She said it was a rock. Another rock. "A rock?" I asked. "What?" All at once, she starts to blurt out in the darkness, "I'm sorry, I lied. It was a Bigfoot, not a bear, that I saw. And I think it's back. It's been throwing rocks and things." She was starting to freak out, though she was trying to keep it under control and be quiet. Now, I had just come awake. It was dark. It was raining. And the entire time she had seemed a little off. And now, well, there she is in the darkness, talking about Bigfoot. Yes, I was having a little trouble processing all of that at once. But the fact remained, something had thrown a rock into the shelter. That was undeniable. I fished out my flashlight, turned it on, and I took a look at the rock on the floor just to be sure she wasn't wrong about what was happening. And that's when I saw there were probably 4 or 5 more rocks there. I guess I hadn't heard them when I was sleeping. Or maybe I had heard them, and that is what woke me up. I shined my flashlight out of the shelter and moved it side to side. Then she whispers that I should turn that off. It doesn't like the light. "What?" I asked her. She said when she first heard it come back and she turned her flashlight on, that was when it started throwing rocks. I looked at her in the darkness. She couldn't see me, but I did it anyway. I said, "I don't care what it likes or doesn't like. I'm not sitting in the dark blind while something like that may be out there, and it might be dangerous." Unlike Smokey, and what she didn't know is that I was armed. I had a .357 on me. The zipping noise as I undid the Velcro on my thigh pants pocket sounded very loud in the darkness, but I didn't care. I didn't take the gun out, but I tucked the pocket flap in behind the gun so I could get to it quickly. "I have a gun," I whispered in the darkness. Incredibly, she began to freak out even more. "You're going to get us killed," she whispered. She couldn't have seen the look on my face, or she'd have seen how stupid I thought that was. "Are you kidding me?" I said. "There's something out there in the darkness, and you're worried about me with a gun?" I couldn't believe it. She said something back, but I'll be honest. After what she just said, I just tuned her out. I was going to protect myself at all costs. My mind was now focused in on the dark and any sound. Whatever it was, I hadn't heard it come any closer. It hadn't charged, and I took that to be good news. I turned the lens focus on my flashlight to narrow the beam down so it projected out much further. I then swept the area again back and forth. I stopped suddenly when I thought I saw some eye shine. It flashed amber, and if those were eyes, they were very high up and very far apart. It was only a second, and then the amber lights went behind a tree. I had to blink and refocus because I'd been focusing on the amber eye flashes so much that I took no note if it was a face, but I was pretty sure I saw a head shape. The rain was still coming down, but it was strange how my hearing was now able to separate the rain away from other noises. I was listening for the creature as I focused the light on the tree that I had seen the eye shine go behind. Then I saw a dark figure quickly move sideways and up to a tree closer to our shelter. It moved so fast, and it got behind the tree so quickly, I wasn't able to get my light completely on it. But what I saw was shocking. Its size was immense. I was processing the size of the torso and the back that I had caught a glimpse of as it moved, when I suddenly heard the whistle of another rock flying very near my head. That was way too close. I didn't even see it throw the rock, and I had the flashlight aimed in that direction. I panned the light over and over to the far side of the tree, and then I was rewarded with a flash of dark fur as it moved to yet another tree. Oh, I thought, it was leapfrogging ever closer to us. I kept the light on it as I bent down and picked up one of the many rocks on the shelter floor. I decided that turnabout was fair play. I wound up, and I watched the rock hit the tree just behind the one it was hiding behind. I realized I was a little rusty from my ball-playing days, but I think it might have gotten the message. The only reason I had not used my gun yet was I needed to be absolutely sure this was no human playing a prank on us. And I was pretty sure now it was not some human. The whole time Smokey was over there losing her mind. She was now next to me, and she was telling me to stop, that I was going to make that thing mad. I don't know if she couldn't see that it was coming closer to us or not, and I really didn't care. I worked on tuning her out. At this point, I had every intention of shooting it if I got a good shot of it. I was planning to send that thing, whatever it was, to wherever the afterlife would take it, and I was going to do so and send it with a belly full of lead. I remember thinking those exact thoughts. I was done with the rocks. I pulled out that .357 and took aim, waiting for that thing to come out from behind the tree again. After a few minutes, I got tired of waiting. I had seen just the edge of its furry shoulder at the edge of the tree that it was hiding behind. As soon as it seemed to move, I took the shot, but I only grazed the tree above the shoulder. I was hoping for a clear headshot, but if I could just wound it, maybe it would get out from behind the tree. That would work too. It had worked before in some other situations, so I was hoping for the same. After I fired that shot, Smokey starts yelling like crazy. I don't know whether that Bigfoot knew what a gun was and decided it was time to leave, or if it was just deciding to retreat to a safer place, maybe to plan another attack. Either way, I really didn't care. I had a great shot of its fat, furry, melon-shaped head as it left that tree and tried to go back to the previous one. I had a shot at it, and as I promised, I took that shot. But just as I fired, old Crazy Smokey knocked my arm upward, yelling. She was screaming that I was going to kill her with that gun. I was going to get us both killed, she said. She was screaming all kinds of nonsense. Turns out, Crazy Smokey was anti-gun. She was more afraid of me with a gun than she was of a Bigfoot coming at us in the darkness. Now, when she did that, she also knocked my flashlight out of my other hand. So I not only had to maybe fight a Bigfoot in the darkness, I had to fight the crazy lady too. You know, I don't think I could have asked for a more messed up situation. Well, I threw her off to the side, grabbed the flashlight, and lit up the area where the Bigfoot had been. But it was gone. Now, where it had gone, I had no idea, thanks to Crazy Smokey. I was so mad at her, all of my adrenaline funneled into anger at her. I could have shot her right then and there, but thankfully a cooler part of my brain won out. I told her to go sit on her side of the shelter, and when she did, she sat over there and cried and tried to talk to me. I didn't want to hear any of it. I was not feeling very kindly towards her, so I'm just going to say that it was a very long night, Neither of us slept, and morning couldn't come fast enough. I was miserable, watching, listening, and waiting all night, and trying to ignore her. I sat up that whole night, not only angry at her, but I really was convinced that Bigfoot would be back with a vengeance, and maybe with some reinforcements. But it did not ever come back. I did not get a real close look at it. Everything I saw was in the light of a flashlight on a dark, rainy night. I would put the distance between me and that Bigfoot at between 50 or 40 feet at the closest point, much farther than that when it started. I really don't know how some people can tell you eye color, fur length, patterns of the fur on the face, and the skin tone. Maybe in the daylight up close, but I really don't know. I can't even be certain that it was male or female. From where I was, everything was dark, and it was just a shape or a mass that moved. There was some eyeshine flashing, but that's all I saw. But what I saw was enough that I do believe Crazy Smokey was right on one thing. That was a Bigfoot. When the sun came up, I was ready to make tracks out of there. So was she. Even though old Smokey was supposed to be going in the opposite direction of me, she stuck with me. She stuck to me like glue. Now, I was parked all the way back by I-40. As I said, I would normally do round trips, but Brown Gap was much closer, only about 5 miles ahead. So that's where we headed. I still couldn't get a signal there on my phone, and neither could Smokey. But incredibly, some teenager there with his parents heard us, and he said, "Hey, I've got a signal. Do you need to use my phone?" Now, he had some no-name brand knockoff smartphone, but he had a signal. My iPhone did not have a signal. We both used his phone to contact people for pickups. My pickup was going to be there in about an hour and a half. And when they arrived, Smokey assured me she had a ride, so I left her there. And there were many people coming and going from that trailhead area, so I thought she would be fine. I'm sure she was. But truthfully, I couldn't wait to get away from her. I was still angry. She could have absolutely killed me or herself with a stunt like that in the middle of the night. People who are afraid of guns, well, sometimes they are the bigger danger, and they don't even realize it. That's all I will say on that. It was a very long night. My sighting of it was brief, but enough to convince me that they do exist. While we spent that night waiting for sunrise, old Smokey, she babbled an awful lot. She said she was convinced that it had been stalking her all the way there. She said that it had focused on her, that it wanted her. How true that was, I really don't know. I do think old Smokey was a touch crazy. And I still don't think that I ever got all the details or the whole truth of what happened before I arrived there at that shelter area. I guess it doesn't matter now, does it? But one interesting thing. By the time we made it to Brown Gap, Smokey was acting like nothing had ever happened. Once we were about a mile or two from the shelter and there was no sign of anything following us, she was right as rain. She acted like I was the crazy one when I casually asked her if she planned to tell anyone about this Bigfoot incident. She seemed to act like she didn't know quite what I was talking about and that no such thing had happened. You know, I do not understand people or their reactions to these creatures. I have now traveled that same stretch of the trail many more times since then, and I have never had another run-in with a Bigfoot. In fact, I've never had another questionable incident. But if I ever do, I sure hope that Bigfoot leaves me alone, because then I can leave him alone, which is what I really wanted to do even that night. Now, if anyone else listening has had a run-in with a Bigfoot on that stretch of the Appalachian Trail, I'd really like to hear about it. Signed, Colin. All right, my Sasquatch, I do hope you liked that one. That was another seat gripper for sure. Thank you, Colin, for that email. And I do hope you've recovered from that terrifying night. And old crazy Smokey, wherever she is, well, I hope she's okay too. Now listen, it's a little less than 2 weeks to Halloween, and I've only gotten 2 stories sent in for the Halloween marathon. So if you're out there and you've got a story that you think would be just right for a Halloween marathon, be sure to send it in, and be sure to tell me that it is for the Halloween marathon. All right, otherwise, I think it's going to be all for tonight. We are done. Thank you for staying with me for the whole journey once again. And don't worry, as always, we'll be meeting up here again real soon. And until then, please, always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.